So I'll start with the first question, then maybe I'll look to see if we have any more from the audience. We're really interested here at the forum about this moving from kind of new ideas and new research and going towards the market. So I'm wondering if some of you can comment on what you see as the largest barriers right now for industry implementation of 3D printing in construction.
May I respond?
Yes, please, Barak, start us off.
Right. I guess I enumerated the barriers in my presentation. So I believe the major barrier is competitiveness with respect to cost. It is really not easy to compete with conventional construction. They can build everything pretty much. They have total flexibility. Manual work is very flexible. Again, they do not need much equipment, not much asset. They're very agile. And just competing with that kind of capability and competing economically is very difficult. That is what I think is a major barrier. That's
Would anybody else like to add to that? Yeah, Anya?
Yes, I think I agree with Barak. When we approach customer, the first thing is, that's nice, but how much does it cost? And it's construction is even to the penny. They want to decrease the price, absolutely. But beside this, I had one very striking feedback from a customer, which is actually a customer of us. He just simply told me, you know, we are constructing the same way since 60 years, so we will not change from one day to another. So it's just a mental, for some people, is accepting there's a change. And he was really like, the price we were discussing were really the same. For him, it was really like just mentally the barrier of change.
Yeah, some of the normal ways of doing things. And Benjamin, I know you have a different approach where you say we're not just trying to cut costs, but we're trying to add value. So maybe you could comment, is that an approach to increase adoption of 3D printing?
It's definitely something we try, but actually as a reaction to what Barak said, because I do think currently there are many products where we cannot compete cost-wise. So one way is to probably create a higher value in the product. But also, I mean, I can't say exactly if this is the only or the very successful strategy, but we will try that.
Good. Any other comments? Yeah, Luca.
I guess, you know, Barak outlined it very well. The construction industry has very low margins, so they really had to work it out from the pennies. And what I've seen firsthand is also what we call workflow inertia. So they have an established workflow that involves you know, design, inspection, validation that is done in a certain time frame, and you have to fit into that. Otherwise, too many disruptive changes destabilize the status quo too much. We found a success or a successful engagement when the final user or the client was in pain, and we helped to achieve what was impossible to do with their you know, regular workflow. And because at that point he was speaking on our behalf and championing another approach.
Great. So we have a question from the audience, from Sophia Lopez, who asks, could you please share regulations and compliance boards, licensing, or standard advancements happening around 3D construction in your respective countries? Or lack of, if it's not happening. Yeah, Anya, yeah.
So there's a group that is led by Stefan Mansour for regulating 3D concrete printing or 3D printing for construction. And so they are trying to set up, to define new rules and regulation standards for how to qualify and how to achieve a certain quality and also repeatability of 3D printing. But beside this, in Switzerland, at least for Switzerland and some countries in Europe, there are no regulation rules available, not that I know. And we have to comply with existing rules and regulations.
Yeah, Baroque. Yeah.
Yes, again, as I indicated, I think we are the first company that has started the process of developing special regulations for 3D printing construction. And we have initiated this with the supervision of the ICC, International Code Council. And the procedure is written as AC 509, excuse me, document. And we are in the process of doing the related tests at our company under an accredited laboratory. So specimens have to be built and sent to an accredited laboratory under the supervision of ICC. And once the criteria is met, the certificate would be issued.
And Mark, from your position with the Netherlands, you've had several now of these bridge projects. How do you find the kind of regulatory aspect evolving?
So I think we work with because we work within the Eurocodes and we work on the design and test method. So everything is we're working with the university, so everything's approved. But when we're looking at different markets, it seems that there is, if we want to work within the UK, there is a barrier for entry in terms of getting customers and designers to adopt it in their design, in their workflows, because it's so new, and finding those bodies to work with to get traction. So we're starting off small with printing street furniture and things like that, so that customers can see what we can achieve with the printing methods. But then at the same time, working with them and design consultants to get these methods accepted as well. So it's I think that's what's slowing us down a bit to get it more widely adopted. From a commercial perspective, we own, as a contractor, we own main contractor, we own the whole process. So we can get it to work at the minute about cost neutral if you take into account everything that we would normally do. But even our own teams say, how much will it cost?
So maybe an opportunity to redefine the boundaries of products and change the way we think about the whole cost. Shifting some things around there can be a strategy.
Exactly, and that has to be done from right at the beginning of the process. You have to think, that's why we want people to have it as an option right at the beginning when they're designing, because then you can start to build factor everything in, and then realize the actual cost, instead of what we've found. Over time we've developed our processes, but you're always taking a design that was intended for a traditional method of construction and then changing it all to suit our factory method. So
great. And I want to have another question from Ricardo de Matos Camarina. I think it's a question that gets asked quite a lot at anything around digital fabrication or robotics. He asks, most of the pictures today did not include people, but robots or equipment. Where do people join the 3D printing value chain, and how can their replacement be mitigated? And I think another important follow-up question is, which stakeholders share responsibility in addressing this challenge? Hey, Baruch, yes, give it a shot.
Right. So this is a sensitive topic. And my opinion is that as history has shown, certain professions tend to be drastically impacted by emergence of new technologies. When I was doing my doctoral research, my entire dissertation was typed by a typist. There was an army of those people around. We didn't have personal computers, you know. There was a mainframe computer and we had very limited access to it. And we couldn't type. We were not sending emails or anything in order to get educated about typing. People now, because of the need, learn typing. And everybody does their own word processing and all. But anyway, that profession vanished as a whole. We don't find really typists anymore. You can look at a lot of other professions. When even steam engine was invented, there was a question of what's going to happen to these carriage drivers, for example. Well, we shouldn't really expect necessarily for the professions to keep the status quo and be what they already are. So there has to be major changes. And there are always newer industries created. And the new education would be needed to do less of the muscle work and more of the mental work, more of the creative work. And that's where humanity in general is being directed. Even a lot of service work is being automated by artificial intelligence. And in the end, it is the creativity of humans that would be needed, because computers would be able to do everything else. And automated system would be able to do everything else. What computers have not yet managed to do is creativity. They're doing creative work. Not a single funny joke is made by any computer. But humans do that all the time. That's just
Mark,
one.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say, Mark, you had your hand up. I wanted to see if you had a follow-on or opinion on this.
No, I mean, we're a construction company. We're struggling to get people to do some of this work. And that has an impact on the cost, because we've got lots of work, not many people, prices go up, quality suffers, all these things. So I think it's really an opportunity for us to fill the gap that there is in the industry anyway with these technologies. And we're working with, part of the mobile factory we have. One of the things we did was we took some of our more traditional guys from one of our projects that was spraying concrete with a pump, and we taught them how to use the robot, and print concrete. So we can, it's not, we're training and upskilling people to use these new technologies as well. So they're not going to, it's not a case of that people are just going to, jobs aren't going to be there for people. They're just going to be different jobs, and there's different access points into all of this. And we do have a highly professional team that are coding and programming the robots, but then we also have engineering teams that are have been project-based or could have been project-based, working with these systems as well. So I think we're not going to replace people yet. We're just going to improve how we deliver projects and how people work in projects.
And it can be a conversation that goes for a long time. So maybe I'll just move us on to the next question, just for the sake of getting to some of these questions. There's a question from Zig Rubel who says the 3D printed pieces are becoming quite large, which is exciting. But where do you see the convergence or divergence of the size of elements or a movement to in situ printing versus offsite to avoid movement? So maybe Anya, you could start with your thoughts on this, and others could follow.
Yes, so this is the central question that we have every day. As we have started with a stationary system, but we want and the definitely the vision is to get mobile. I think it all depends on the types of market, the fragmentation of the market, and the distances to the precast factory. And last but not least is the space that you have on a job site. So in Switzerland, I think in Europe, the distances to a factory are so short that precast is much more economic than printing on site, like really in the trench. But probably like at least economically, we did some calculation, is from a certain distance to the precast factory, then it really becomes very interesting to either like move the precast factory on the job site or directly print in the trench. And this is really dependent on from my understanding, on the fragmentation of the market, the job site, logistics, or how much space do you have there, how long is the job site, and what you want is really to increase the usage of your machine as much as possible. So as I think Mark showed, they are optimizing, even producing a couple of pieces which have probably nothing to do with each other, but such that the machine runs all day long. So it's really a question of volume and transport distances.
Anyone would like to add to that?
I think some I was going to say there's some of the mega projects that we're looking at, the amount of workforce that they need on the projects, they're designing the whole project so that they can be delivered, 70% can be manufactured away and brought in. So a lot of the logistics and delivery infrastructure is based around rail. So you can have factories in Europe, you can have factories all over a country. You can set them up in away from the project, but just deliver, produce elements and deliver them in by rail and things like that for some of the big projects. So that's another thing that we're looking at, is like having distributed sites for big projects as well.
And a question then for Benjamin and Luca to shift slightly. It's one about sustainability, and we often hear about dematerialization. In fact, we heard it throughout all the presentations about dematerialization being the primary sustainability motivation here. But I also understand that, when you're doing 3D printing, you have to use certain specified materials, could be admixtures, it could be more cement content. So is the trade-off working? I speak to cement, but I assume it's also similar with metals. Is the trade-off worth it? And how do we go towards this path of more bio-based materials, Benjamin, that you presented?
Yeah, I think it's still a challenge. I think some of the speakers also addressed this, and there are some products in development, but it's always a multi-criteria optimization also towards sustainability. So already if we save weight, we might save on the logistic side also energy. And even if we use more cement content, like in some of our printed projects, we do that. If we then take into account that we have less volume, then it balances out, and then it has some other benefits. But those are complex calculations, and for sure the community, and we should move towards using more sustainable material, also thinking about how the printed part, for example, can be recycled maybe later. And there's not a single golden answer for this, just that the awareness, and I think it's maybe normal because these are new technologies that still need to develop and first work, but now it's time to optimize and steer them towards a more sustainable mix.
Yeah, Luca.
I just wanted to add that when it comes to the metal 3D printing, what you have seen is that you have to build a set of twins and use the same powder in the same batch to guarantee almost identical performance of two components. One will be sent for the destructive test, and the other one is the actual final product that you may use. So in that portion of the workflow at the end for the certification, you have to make sure that the two parts are almost identical, so they use the same, not just the same material, but it comes from the same batch because of the type of powder. I don't know if this adds any good information on the topic, but for us it was quite a shock because those parts can be very expensive, and you need to build a set of two at least every time you build one.
And so, another question I have, and as we're getting towards the end here, this is a Zoom forum, of course, but the roots of the Industrialized Construction Forum come from Stanford and Silicon Valley. So, as we think about this, and I know that there are many or several venture capitalists and investors in the audience, what are the specific challenges that are facing startups in the 3D printing space? And I think Baroque and Anya, you would be the most qualified to answer, but of course, happy to hear the opinions of all of the panelists.
I'm sorry, would you please repeat? I got distracted.
Yeah, the specific challenges for startups like contour crafting in 3D printing that you face.
Right.
In terms of being a startup, and is it raising capital? Is it attracting talents? What are some of the startup related issues?
Well, the main problem is that this is a startup that is dealing with disruptive technology. Even for a very established corporation to bring a disruptive technology, the challenges are huge, because it's a new paradigm for which the infrastructure has not been set up. The people, potential customers are skeptical about it. And the main problem is really having a market, You can raise the fund as I did, and some others apparently have, but there's no guarantee that you can have an easy path towards commercialization. So this is the nature of disruptive technologies, and there are many examples of it. The jet engine was invented 40 years before it was first used. It was a very disruptive technology. Graham Bell's telephone, it looked like a slam dunk invention at the time of telegraph. But there's a famous quotation by the president of Western Union. He said, when people have telegraph, who needs telephone? And he was very right. He was a smart businessman. There was no wiring infrastructure anywhere. Rockefeller became a billionaire because he sold kerosene to homes at the same time. People didn't have electricity in the homes. So without that infrastructure, telephone didn't mean anything. It was just a waste of time. By the time you had to first send a telegraph anyway to the other guy to come to the station, to the telegraph station, and then you go there at a certain time, and then use that by the set time you say, hi, how are you? The operator could have used that line to send several telegrams. I don't want to go too much into this thing, but there are books written on disruptive technologies. So the challenge is huge. It's not trivial. That's the main problem.
And Anya, do you have something to add from the Swiss perspective as well?
Yeah, maybe not from the Swiss perspective, but that from a different perspective, I would say. So for us, the technology is definitely not an issue to get on the market because we are using sprayed concrete. If you talk to a person in construction, and we are talking to people from infrastructure, what we tell them is, look, you have been spraying concrete since 100 years. We take the same technology, put this in the hands of a robot, and make it better, control it like in every second we control it. So we have sold projects and product with like the customer never even had a look on our technology. He didn't care. What he was caring is about the final product. Does that meet my expectation and the cost? So at least for us, the technology acceptance here is not the case. And that's why we are looking at utility products. I know it's really not sexy, but this is really just a problem. We have a solution. The question is at which price and what is the speed? So are we able to deliver? Today, our first, and I'm sending maybe a call here because there's 200 participants, and I hope there are some students and with the entrepreneurial spirit. Our challenge every day is to find the right people to join the team. Because in Europe, we have people, so the startup or entrepreneurship mindset is really not developed. So the market for talented people is really reduced. If you add on top of this that you're working in construction, this makes even less attractive for many talent in startups and tech. So we are facing in Europe really this challenge of having a very limited pool of talents with the right mindset and the right experience of having a startup or working in a startup, combined with the construction. I would say people think that it's construction, and yes, it's true. We're working with concrete, but we are working with sensors, data science, technology, IoT, etc. So this is, for me, like, this is my everyday battle, is to really have the people motivation and the mindset to find the right people.
It's a perfect promo for my talk after the break about academia and its role in training these people. So yeah. Thanks for the nice connection. Let me just add with a chance for you to give a final word. So, I like to ask the question, where do you see 3D printing going in the next 3 to 5 years? And maybe each of you could think about that and give a short response. So just to call on somebody, maybe Benjamin, you can start us off.
I mean, also looking at the presentation I've seen today, and of course I know most of the work also, I do think that we will have a really diverse landscape of 3D printing in construction. Hopefully it will gain more relevance also in daily construction, and we don't know how time-wise this develops. Barak gave this example of 40 years of wait time, hopefully not that much. But as construction and architecture is such a diverse area, I would see really a multitude of these approaches come to market and be successful there.
Mark, what do you think?
No, I mean, I think we have near-term scale-up plans to, because we can see projects demanding, customers want innovation and new methods in their projects. So we have, that's the good thing in our partnership, is that we have customers already, and we've been working with them for a long time to develop relationships and propose these solutions to them. And they're now starting to, that work is starting to bear fruit, and we've got projects in the UK coming up. We've done in partnership with the ones in Belgium. So we can see there's a demand, and there's different use cases that we can satisfy. So I think we are in that, we've gone through a lot over the last 3 or 4 years. And I think we're in now that sort of phase where we're into sort of really productive phase, and with some good opportunities on the horizon.
Luca, your thoughts?
I'd say, I agree with Benjamin. The landscape was different, requests are different. I see the discipline, if you will, moving on different fronts. the components, the small components, the large components, and the full scale. And I guess as soon as the entire ACE industry will accept that for 3D printing, we have to switch from tolerance of centimeter to tolerance of millimeter if we want to build highly technological components. That will allow us to do more, because we are embedding the 3D printing many things. We want to have a sensor, we want to put pre-stress cable, we want to put potentially space for HVAC system, or we want to run cables, electrical cables into the component itself. So there are different avenues and different sizes of the products that we can do in the near future. But if I look back, I see a phenomenal progress. 10 years from now, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, the progress is unbelievable, in my humble opinion.
Anya, your last thoughts?
Yeah, so I think 3D concrete printing will follow the same exponential path as any other metal or silicon or all other types of material. I think the path will be more or less the same as in other industry, like for 3D printing, if I take aviation. So there will be some bigger players. There will there are more and more projects. If you look at what Beroc did at the very beginning and how this exponential curve started, I think it's going to grow with the number of projects, number of competitors. I think where we will focus and where I think there's a big challenge is in educating construction companies of taking risk and accepting to make mistakes, and that the investment is not an investment of material, hardware, software, but it's an investment of training the people. Like BIM, like if you talk to a construction company that is adopting BIM, it takes about 5 years to have the company really integrated with being people really trained and making money. And I think this is where we want to focus, is really pick up the most, like the early adopters that are willing to develop this training, understanding, doing mistakes and learning from this.
And Baroque, I saved the last word for you. So where do you think we go in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, next 3 to 5 years, I think, is the time where early adopters get into the market and take the challenge, take the risk. And that would be a great opportunity for the technology to try and find its weak points and focus on those. In my opinion, again, the weak point is economic disadvantage that it has. And for everything that 3D printing is doing right now, there are conventional alternatives. Prior to this, is exotic structures were made by carving, using a router, a CNC, carving into foam and then pouring concrete in it, much nicer surface quality. And there was a possibility of embedding all kinds of reinforcement structures in it. So, and there are still, I know companies that do that and they do a wonderful job. The competition is stiff, it's not trivial, but over time, of course, like all other 3D printing methods, this technology is also going to prevail, but it's not necessarily going to push any of the conventional methods out of the market. It is going to have its own niche.
I think that's a great place to end it. Once again, thank you to all the panelists for the wonderful presentations.